Hello, and welcome to Office Hours. Our show is dedicated to answering your questions about media and virtual production. We have a fine panel assembled here to do that for you. If you'd like to ask any questions, go to officehours.global. There you can submit your questions into our Makana answering service and find out about some of the other things that other activities. Really, it's about our community. This is just when we hold our office hours every day. But anyway, we'll get right into our questions. Mitchell, what do we have?
Thank you, Josh. Our first question comes to us from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, what is the difference between a ham radio microphone and a regular mic? For example, the Heil PR40 is listed as both a ham radio and a broadcaster microphone, and they have a link to it there.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, any microphone that works and does what a microphone does could be used in a ham shack. But for the most part, ham radio microphones of the handheld variety all have push-to-talk. So you can key your transmitter, talk, and then let go. They generally don't leave them in a locked position. So that means a handheld with a push-to-talk button, a desktop like the oldest static, which was on a stalk, and the whole handle itself had a button in it that allowed you to key the transmitter. Those are typical ham radio-operated microphones. A lot of them also have preamps built into a desktop console so that you can adjust the modulation level, because a ham radio operator is very keen to get maximum modulation, and they're probably looking at a scope or some other device that lets them see how much volume. So they're very concerned about the levels they're sending in there. And you can be anything from a condenser to a dynamic like the Heil PR40 to even a carbon microphone. I remember the old carbon mics. If you could shake them, you could hear the carbon granules inside of it moving. So of the three types, I would prefer the dynamic for a ham setup.
Thanks, Mitchell. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, my license has long expired. Mr. Proto, who is next, is a more current ham. My first instinct was I would never spend that amount of money on a ham microphone. You know, if you're in shortwave, then you just really don't need that quality of sound. And if you're doing FM, then you want, as Mitch said, a push to talk. I think the other thing is I don't know, I've seen a ham rig that would take a professional input. It's probably TRS or something. So you'd need to be able to make sure that microphone worked with the rig you're buying.
John, care to weigh in?
Paul knows all this. KK7BPD, and Bob specifically narrows those frequency responses on those ones that are specifically designed for ham radio. So they're really high energy in the vocal range as well.
There you go. Let's go to our next question.
From Stan Chan in San Francisco, California, we've got a bunch of regular BNC connectors, but also ordering Neutrik rearTWISTs. What are the benefits of the Neutrik ones, and should I dump the old ones, and should I just use the rearTWISTs?
I know that these are the preferred. Brand and quality. There are several. I know YouTuber sound speeds are really big on those as well, and I believe putting them on and off. Mitchell, care to weigh in?
Yeah, it's the twister are very helpful. First of all, they're easy to use. They're Neutrik, which means they'll last forever. And the other thing is that once you've installed it in your rack and you need to go in later and you've got this high concentration of BNC connectors, it's very hard with a regular BNC to get your little fingers in there without using a device like a trumpet, which is a device that allows you to slide it over the wire and crank the BNC out. The twists have a little spacer on there. You can get it with your fingertips real easily. So it's probably a much better investment to make. And also be careful you get the right wire to go with the right connectors.
I've always called them Neutrik. I don't know if that's just me. But
Neutrik, tomato, you know.
There we go. Let's go to our next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. When I watch behind-the-scenes videos of many large events, they typically use a very clipped style on comms. Go, no go, copy that. However, the banter before office hours seems to be very relaxed and informal. Why could that be?
Go ahead, Jesse.
There's a couple of things going on here. The first is that like a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert is much more high stakes than this program. I'm not saying that we don't like to keep a clean show and keep it professional, but there's just a lot more money riding on every performance by them. So in general, the people behind the scenes are going to be very sharp, very on point, in and out with their communication as efficiently as possible. Another thing that's going on is that this program does have another tier of people who are operating behind the scenes, and they have the job of keeping their communications shorter and cleaner, and the panelists and hosts have the job of keeping it more informal and casual and welcoming to anybody who might pop in. So that would be contributing to that.
Thanks, Jesse. Mitchell.
Yeah, there's a whole different stuff going on behind the scenes. Our comms, which we use Unity for, is probably more like what you were referring to there, Douglas, the go, no-go, copy that, direct to so-and-so. The reason for it on comms is you don't want to have a lot of chatty stuff going on because somebody may be listening to something else. They may be on the air and talking, which is very hard to talk and listen to somebody. So economies of wordage on Unity always works best, and that's pretty much universal.
Jesse, some more to add?
Yes, the one time the behind the scenes people came onto my headphones, it scared me very, very much. And then when it turned out to be a casual, friendly compliment, I was surprised that was even allowed. I was very happy to hear it.
Do you mean on this show or in your own experience? On this show, okay, yeah. And I could say, Douglas, that we can view this show in many different ways. Many of us are watching it on YouTube. There is a way you can view it in after hours too. So we get to see and hear the banter with the panel. That turned me around. The panel banter, before the show, which is not the comms. Our comms are actually much more succinct and much more to the point than the banter that we have among the panelists before. And it is recommended. This is probably a good opportunity to talk about our opportunity to volunteer. If you get the email, which you should, it might be in your junk mailbox, by the way. There is an opportunity to help out, team opportunities. One of those is to join the show. So when we have comms talking to each other, it is preferable that we say what we need to say in the quickest time period possible. I don't know. I call it long keying. It might be something more like a ham thing, but holding down microphone and talking on a channel for a long time means that our comms, you can overtalk each other, but it's still not, you don't step on each other like only a one-way comms. But still, it's always best to be succinct, and it's an art form to be able to think about what you want to say and say it in the quickest amount of time possible. And oftentimes too, just saying things on comms, we eliminate all doubt as to whether that message got through. So we have a bit of a check that happens whenever you say something to someone. It's customary for us to say copy so that we understand that message has been received. Typically, we would say Roger, meaning that we've not only received that transmission, but we intend to do something about it. So that quick communication style is very effective in running any back end. And usually when someone is just new and onboarding on the comms, they haven't got it yet. So these are professionals. So they are trained in the art of saying exactly what they need to say in the least amount of time. And it's so fantastic when everyone's on board with that, because the team can move in unison. Mitchell, want to weigh in?
Copy that, Josh. Go for Nigel.
Well, I was just going to say it's interesting that I grew up in the UK and Roger means something different to us. So we would have Roger.
Wilco.
Sorry there. I lost the transmission there on you, Nigel. We're going to get on that. We'll check your 20 in just a moment. But it was a cliffhanger too. I wanted to know what the UK Roger was.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, so apologies. I had a technical flizzle. Roger, I grew up in the cadet force in the UK. So Roger would mean I heard you, and if someone said Wilco would mean I've heard you and will act. And so as a good example of your don't over communicate, occasionally in English war films, you'll see them say Roger and Wilco, and that would be redundant.
Belt suspenders, if you will. All right. Good to know. And it's always fascinating to see the colloquialisms in any professional trade. It doesn't matter what you do. People develop local things that they do. And as people circulate into international communities, sometimes they bring their terminology with them. So interesting to know. Stefan.
Yeah, and just a little clarification. Maybe Wilco stands for will comply.
Will comply. Never knew that. Fantastic. Thanks, Stefan.
From air traffic controllers.
Nice. I know that there's more than one phonetic system at play. I think NATO has one when they use the different phonetics, and there's a few other ones. I think the airlines use the NATO ones, if I'm not mistaken. By the way, we have our own office hours NATO phonetic, so just so you know, I might drop that in. Mitchell?
AOK was one of them. I think Alan Shepard was the first to use that. OK is still being used.
Nice. Is there a certain nuance to AOK?
I don't know what the A stands for. Maybe acknowledged and OK. Somebody that's smarter than I am can probably chime in and give you the acronym, but it's just a general Air Force term that's used quite a bit.
Who did you say coined that, Mitchell?
Alan Shepard in his first flight. OK.
Well, it does start with an A. Okay.
Might be just it rhymes with K.
There you go. Yeah, and speaking of the phonetics, using phonetic, alpha, beta, Charlie, in order to communicate things is all about getting more signal and less noise using your voice. So making sure that your communications are heard. And typically the words that are specifically chosen cannot be mistaken for similar words. And that's why they're somewhat standardized as far as how to make communications. But I believe we did have a second hour on comms, but it's always something that.
And since we have hams here, they could probably go down the whole alphabet. Papa, Foxtrot. What's N, John? N is
November.
That's it.
Fantastic. And I'm wondering too that those are all the NATO phonetics, right? Yeah. Was there another closely competing phonetic alphabet that is in circulation, or is it
Klingon? Klingon has their own.
That's right. There's a lot of case there.
I think there are some words in the NATO that are viewed politically sensitive. So particularly the one for Z or Z is questioned. So some people swap some of those out and start putting in names. But most people who know the phonetic alphabet from the NATO, it's really hard to stop and think about and change.
I think they use Zeke now for that word.
Nice. Yeah, it's usually best if it's a word that's not, it's not confused with another word. And there's probably lots of different words you can use. I can say from having created a phonetic alphabet that there are some words that are particularly tricky to make. I believe X-ray is the X, right, in the NATO one. Making that one for office hours was particularly difficult. Yeah, but you'd prefer not to say the letter of the word that you're, beginning with the phonetics, but sometimes there's just those tricky letters that's all you can do. All right, fantastic. Hopefully we've given you some food for thought. It's always very interesting in watching professionals talk over comms. And if you don't quite catch the lingo the first time around, once you understand the keys to it, watching them perform on comms, having that back channel is fascinating to see that happen at the highest levels of our industry. Let's go to our next question, Mitchell.
From James Fosline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. James asked, just watched a good YouTube video on FM synthesis. Is there anything we could do as a community to curate good audio-video tutorials, explanations, reviews of YouTubers? Do we just have to find what works best for us on our own?
Yeah, I think, James, what people are mostly interested in tutorials is that we get directly to the point. You can tell people that have just started making videos and they're like, hey, on YouTube particularly, hey, welcome to my channel. I've decided to make this video because I know what I'm interested in. Typically, if I'm using YouTube as a search engine and to find things, if I find a tutorial, I'm probably not interested in all the minutia around why you created the video, but having that succinct information curated to the point. I mean, we just talked about phonetics and the comm speak. It's basically the same point. I want more signal, less noise, more protein, and less filler in my YouTube videos. What do you think, Nigel?
Yeah, I think part of this is the YouTube algorithms, and I'm not the person with the latest knowledge of all of those, but there was a while that we were all being told we had to make videos over 10 minutes or do something or the other. And that drove this thought that the people had an idea and a good thing that would take 1 minute to explain, which would be fine in a short, but they then turned it into a 10-minute video, and it became incredibly tedious to watch.
Yeah, the nice thing I like about those is YouTube now has that little heat map down by the progress bar, and you're like, there's where the meat's at, right there. Go ahead, John.
This is a $1 million question for the office hours database. We're trying to link between Jeffrey and I. We're trying to link my database up with his notes inside of YouTube, so that you're going to be able to quickly find stuff within the videos. And then for everything else, Filmot, FILMMOT, I'll put it in the chat room, is a great subtitler searcher for YouTube. It's an amazing tool.
Yeah, I believe for the full powers of Filmot to work, the channel has to have it uses the automatically generated credit. So you need to have that turned on so that the system can parse that. But fantastic. I think there's even, like, speaking of heat maps, there's like a little bit of a word cloud you can have for a channel. It's a good way of sort of characterizing it. The most commonly used phrases you can have. I remember Guy and Jonas showing us that. It's a fantastic tool. Once that data is there and can be parsed, there's some really interesting things you could find with it. Let's go to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, could Wave or a similar tool help make sure video content is accessible?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
And just to make that clear, that's not Waves, the audio plugin. It's Wave, a plugin for checking accessibility on websites. We had a whole hour-long second hour yesterday with Laura Thompson talking about it. And Laura indicates that there's going to be a lab Thursdays from 4:30 p.m. or PT, Pacific time. So you get a chance to hear more about it. As far as video goes, I think it might be possible. It would have to traverse the metadata that's associated with it or not associated with it in order to determine whether or not it's properly describing what's being viewed on the video.
Thank you, Mitchell, for that. Appreciate Laura's second hour. Go ahead, Harshit.
So in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG or WCAG, video is part of one of the pillars of the guidelines. So when we were talking about like alt tags and stuff, that is one format. But for video, the best alternative, I would say, would be audio description. So that's what I was asking questions about many times over, just with audio description, or knowing that chain, knowing that process, and what extra layers does it take? Do we need multi-tracking? What do we need in our product? So I would say audio description would fit that layer of meeting that need. And then as far as logos and stuff, if you have an intro with music, that's giving you some kind of sound, that's giving you some kind of notification or understandability, which is part of the guidelines of WCAG. And so within video, there isn't anything specific, but again, having proper colors contrasted when you start the video, when you end the video. So when you roll the credits, it's black with white text. That becomes a higher contrast. And so it's what you want to make sure that the end person understands. And then at the end of the day, is it understandable? That is part of the guidelines. And then, is it robust? Can I put it through, an iPhone? Can I put it through an Android device? Can I put it through a Windows machine? So when it meets those guidelines or criterion, you pretty much would pass. So Wave is a great tool, but there's many other types of tools that you could take to reference to see that how much have you got done or how much you need to get done.
Thanks for that, Harshid. And, some people just prefer to listen to shows like this from the audio version too. So making those cues available gives your content a wider distribution. I see Harshid nodding his head. So yeah, let's go to our next question.
Just a quick note real quick there. Whenever you do that, the explanations help. So if you think like a radio person, a person on the radio is always explaining things and, giving you that experience as if you were looking at the screen with them. So just remember to give you a great voice of a radio head, and you'll get your information across the planet.
I just got the memory of the baseball announcer during a cancellation or a delay, and they're like stretching and filling time, and they've got a wax on about some topic to keep the on share the program going and stretching. But yeah, fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
From L. Wilson Spiro in Berlin, for those of you who need to, what are your go-to websites for sourcing sound effects that are licensed for commercial use or are public domain, for example, free theatrical performances?
What do you use, Jesse?
What it lacks in absolute quality, it makes up for in breadth of content. I use Storyblocks for music, sound effects, and occasionally templates.
And how do you find the parsing of that website?
We'll leave it there.
I was curious about that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have the entire Sound Ideas music libraries, quite a few discs, and I have not transferred them to digital. I have to look them up the old-fashioned way through an index or a database to find them. The other one that I do use occasionally, if I can't find it quickly or I'm just lazy, I go to sounddogs.com, and they are a big deal when it comes to doing a search. You can preview them. They watermark them, so you have to buy them. Both of these services I just mentioned, you have to buy those effects. And there's a third, and that is make it yourself. It's possible to do a pretty good job of doing that. If you got like a shotgun mic or a 416, you can go out and record it yourself and not have to pay anybody.
Yeah. I'm sure that there's pros and cons of, creating your own content and, looking for things, finding things. That's why I asked Jesse about, parsing some of the things. Having content and being able to find it, I guess, are two different things, but I'm sure there's advantages and disadvantages to each. Mitchell?
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many sound designers use vocalizations or mouth sounds to simulate something. I was doing a political commercial once, and I had to get this bird flying in the background. I was like, I don't have that. I went. So that's just one of the ways we do it.
I'm thinking of Victor Borg. Go ahead, Borga, rather. Jesse?
That was needlessly harsh of me. There's a lot of good content on Storyblocks, but it is very much a buckshot approach to the website that they've taken.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm curious though. I'm not that familiar with all of the ins and outs. When you start to think about creating and looking at content and getting your audio and fill and even video parts or even photos, what are the rules and laws around fair use, licensing? Probably would be a good second hour. Maybe we'll put that in our suggestions in Discord and see if there's someone that is authoritative that can speak to that. I think that would be helpful for our community. Let's go to our next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida, asking, how do you pitch an idea for a web show?
Nigel.
So I guess it depends who you're pitching it to, because different people will have different requirements. But so let's talk generally about a pitch. You want to know who the audience is and why they would watch it. And then if it's a commercial company that you want to sponsor it, how they're going to make money out of it. But I think the first two are really at the core of this idea, and where most of the stuff that goes wrong, and some of the stuff I think that Josh was talking about earlier, is what you got to be careful of. This is not just you wanting to give information, that there's an audience there to receive it. And part of the problem is why some of the YouTube videos and some of that stuff don't get an audience are they haven't thought about what the audience wants to hear rather than what they want to tell them.
Jesse?
For pitches at any level, keep your pitch a lot briefer than you think you should keep it. Like if you're thinking to go and spend 20 minutes talking, you have pretty much blown your pitch, I can say with a lot of confidence. Try to keep your pitch to 3 minutes, knowing that you're going to go over and bleed into 5 to 7 minutes, because it just takes time to say what you need to say. While you're pitching, focus on characters and emotion. Do not get lost in the weeds with plot machinations, and really don't get lost in the weed with sci-fi technology explanations. Stay focused on the people and the emotions that they will go through in your story. And always remember that you're not just pitching your story, you're pitching yourself. This is not you versus the executives. Go in, listen to what they have to say about your idea. If they give you feedback, that is a gift to you, not an insult.
Fantastic. It sounds like you have some experience there, Jesse. I really made me chuckle when you talked about the sci-fi explanations in your pitch. I don't know many elevator rides that last for 20 minutes, just saying. Stefan?
Yeah, and think about, is your audience there where you want to put this video? For example, many people are trying to advertise many things, but they just advertise it in the wrong place where their audience isn't watching.
Gotcha. And if it helps, I believe Andy mentioned pitching this to corporate execs as opposed to other ways you might pitch. Go ahead, John.
And make sure that you have a clear and specific cost-benefit analysis to explain how the investment into the show will bring benefit to the company.
So less on the sci-fi explanations and more to the cost benefit. Gotcha. Nigel?
Yeah, I just spotted the corporate thing as well. So I'll tell you that I, as a CEO, CMO, I get these all the time. So here's the harsh reality. You have about 30 seconds to engage my interest. And I'll give you 30 seconds, but probably not on much longer than that. So in 30 seconds, you haven't left a hook that makes me think this solves a problem I have, then you're in real trouble. By the way, do your research about me and the company before you do that. And be really clear, without being creepy about it, be really clear that you've done that. And again, I've mentioned this before, the 4 Ps is the fastest way to fix this. So there's this position. This is why it's a problem. The possibilities of this, what we propose is a web show to do that. And if you can get that tight into 30 seconds or a minute, then you've bought the next 5 minutes of the conversation.
It's amazing how being concise has pretty much become a theme today. Good, Mark?
So I think Nigel is right. In the panel discussion, that Andy is saying that he's pitching to corporate execs for a company web show. So I don't know if this is something where you would stay away from a PowerPoint and maybe show a little bit of the storyboard that you've decided to run through a season to give the executives an idea of where it's going to go.
Yeah, I'm sure that a big part of that is knowing who your audience is and what's of interest to them. But I think the overall categories that Nigel mentioned are pretty universal. Let's go to our next question.
And it's from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. My sister can barely use her hands due to multiple sclerosis. Does anyone know where I can find info on how she can use a computer easily?
Go ahead, Harshid.
So if you want to, let's say, dive into the Google ecosystem, if you go to google.com/accessibility, they have sections that might provide some videos and information where switch access might be something that she might be able to utilize. On the Android side, you also have voice access. So if you wanted to, let's say, get onto YouTube, you could use your voice to voice through all the menus and say, okay, go to subscription, go to the first video, go to the second video, and that could revitalize some life. I have MS as well, so I could definitely sympathize with that. And with different platforms such as Apple, they have similar tools as well. So switch access is using it may be type of a toggle or switch to make things easier rather than double tapping or using gestures on a touchscreen. So that might be one method. There's also hooking up a keyboard to the device. So that could allow you to probably function a little bit better. Logitech mechanical keyboard, for example, can hook up your phone, your computer, and you could switch back and forth from it. So if that offers any help, and a lot of text-to-speech variants. So if you have any other extra questions, just throw them in, and I'll try to get them answered.
Thanks for that, Harshid. And I believe Laura was able to submit a link in the chat, given that you're Pennsylvania is a PA link for you there. So check the chat there, John. Let's go to our next question.
David Brady from New York, asking, over the summer at the AVIT Summit there was a live captioning solution from ENCO. It was in use during all the keynotes. It was surprisingly accurate and fast. Has anyone ever seen or used it?
Mitchell?
Anybody that has been in the business of searching for radio automation knows the name ENCO. They have the famous DAD system. So at a very early unveiling of their captioning system, I got a chance to see it, and I was simply amazed because I'm always used to some human interface involved in doing the captioning. The ENCO device is excellent. Very low latency, very intuitive, and probably one of the best standards out there now for doing it that I've seen. I can't speak for all of them, but ENCO, I'm already familiar with them as a solid radio automation system.
Harshid?
I wanted to direct to the Discord server for office hours. We have a section there called either multi-language or captioning. You might drop the question in there because I've always seen some nice conversations that happen in there organically, and you might get a little bit more precise answer to the question about the specific device and the setup.
Thanks for that, Harshid. Hopefully that's helpful. Let's go to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael is in. Douglas asks, after doing some research, I discovered the Savant home audio system uses AVB over Ethernet. Would it be possible to inject a stereo audio stream from a Dante AES source into the network?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm flying a little off kilter here, but AVB is a different system than Dante. It's completely different. It's a competing system and an older system that includes video, and AES is a specification for digital audio. So as long as you have something that can transfer a Dante or an AES source into an AVB system or vice versa, you're going to be okay. But that's usually not a good home remedy for a home audio system.
Oh, thanks, Mitchell. You'll probably, Douglas, get a better, more contextual answer if you ask those on Wednesdays. Oftentimes we have our audio professionals there, then they can take you a lot deeper afield on those questions. But thanks for your question. Let's go to our next one.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael again. What does the panel think of Tata Communications purchasing the Switch?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so I hadn't seen this news, but, the Switch is a huge network switching group. They have a great data center, actually, very near John in Vegas, which used to be owned by Enron, which looks like a fortress. John probably has more details of that. I think Tata is an amazing company. I mean, they are buying lots of things. They are probably one of India's largest businesses. They own Land Rover. They own all sorts of things. And I think, any country that wants to manage its infrastructure needs to watch at who's buying which pieces.
Go ahead, John.
Unfortunately, this switch is a different switch than the switch. This is Switch Communications. This is a different company. They're a hosting company, and they just got sold.
Wow, lots of churn in this field. So as people's methods of monetizing change, it's interesting. I think Sennheiser sold off all of their their audio products to a company that focuses on making hearing aid products. So it's interesting about how the monetization of things happen. Let's go to our next question.
From Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, what is your choice for a field recorder that is self-contained?
Jesse.
We use the Zoom H5 and H6 sometimes, and increasingly we plug directly into the Blackmagic camera. We compared the noise floors of those two devices, and they're incredibly similar.
And that you compare the noise floors of the cameras, mic preamp, and the recorder? Is that
an XLR balanced signal going into the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema is pretty similar to going into an H6 or an H4n even. I'm not saying that the H4n is the industry leader, but it is comparable enough that we feel confident switching those two out. What you lose is the number of inputs if you're on the 4K or the old 6K.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Mitchell.
Yeah, prefer the Atomos line if you're going to do external recording. Certainly sound devices. If it's audio, the Zoom, as Jesse mentioned, the Tascam also has a device for doing that, just audio.
Nice. And, we talk a lot about the Mix Pre line here. I can't comment on it, but one of the reasons why we often use a field recorder in a studio environment is because it has the ability, the second version of them anyway, has the ability to have noise assist along with it. So if you're looking to do a fast turnaround and have that great noise cancellation cut out, that is a line of products that you can look into. Let's go to our next question.
And next question from Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, and here in our panel. What does modular mean?
Well, I'm sure it depends on the context, Harshid. Would you like to fill in where we
Sure.
Where you were hearing it from?
The first question that we had, we used the word modular with microphones, I guess, and just a term. I was like, wait, I don't know what that really means. So I don't know if Mitchell or anybody else has a bit of insight.
Yeah, the impression I get with modular is that there are modules or there's different pieces, components, as opposed to something that is built, complete. There's things that you could interchange or add in or take out. Again, context is helpful for that.
What about in the sense of when he was saying that when you're on the radio, your voice is more modular or something of that nature? That he used a phrase of that sense. Is like the voice becomes more modular, and just that phrase didn't register.
Go ahead, Mitch.
I suspect I understand what you're saying, Harshid. It's more modulated would be the term as opposed to modular.
Word. Yeah, that word.
When you're modulating your voice, you're controlling the dynamics of your voice as you speak it in order to make more consistent volume going down the line to the processing and eventually the transmitter. So, I've heard that used before. Generally, I've not heard modular applied to that context.
And is that, I believe I've heard it talk about modulate is highs and lows, being able to getting that range, that dynamic range. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, coming from the architecture and construction background, modular just means a series of components used to build a bigger system that might be larger. So if you're going to do a modular building, it would be even bays that can easily be added onto in different phases. But it has nothing to do with modular microphones or modular voice.
Yeah, the word was modulated, and I appreciate that explanation.
Gotcha. Thanks. There's so many words and they're so close together. Nigel?
No, I think that just got resolved. I was going to say, I think we're confusing where modulated was used with modular.
Right. Yeah. I took a speaking class, and modulating was one of the things that was a point to work on, where you vary your pitch and pace and also your volume to sound more dynamic, as opposed to speaking in a monotone all of the time, right? So having that's what's of interest to us. No one speaks in a monotone, that in our natural conversation. Hope that's helpful for you too, Harshid. Let's go to our next question.
And it's from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking who plans on checking into after hours for New Year's Eve?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm definitely going to have a lot of ta-da emojis ready to go. They're going to be all over my screen.
John?
So my original streaming company, which was birthed in 1996 called Hello Network, we did a stream where we started in Christmas Islands, and then we had users all over the world, and we went into every time zone that we had a user in those time zones and streamed it live 24 hours around the clock. It was a lot of fun.
Our community is sort of built in with things that we can do 24 hours because, as you know, After Hours runs 24 hours a day, well, 23 and 59 minutes, basically, and 7 days a week. So it's a common community that we have. If you've not taken the opportunity, there are certain things that you can only see in After Hours. For example, some of the show, we don't broadcast it on Sunday, but if you come in to watch the Quiet Hour Theater, you can take in the show. And of course, After Hours is a great place in general to get your tech questions answered. Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, some of our friends who are every now and then in the panel are located in Australia and Melbourne. They already have 2:40 a.m. And our friend Mickey Makachor in Manila, he's celebrating New Year in 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's a thing about time. It's not the same depending on where you're at. So it has to be a 24-hour celebration because that's how many hours there are. Go ahead, Mitchell.
My favorite Doctor Who character says it's a timey-wimey thing. And so it's kind of interesting that when we're celebrating, it's actually already been celebrated somewhere else. So hopefully they can pass on the next day's Powerball winning ticket numbers. Then we'd really have something to celebrate, wouldn't we?
Indeed. John?
If you were able to get into a very fast rocket or a plane and start at the Christmas Island and go around the world at that speed, you could celebrate all 24 time zones.
Nice. What's the airspeed velocity of that?
About 1,000 miles an hour.
There you go.
That's a lot of G's.
That's fantastic. And just so you know, we are happy to take on a few more questions before we start our education hour. So we'll head to our next question. Mitchell?
Next question coming in from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. Chad asks, today ends 2022. What will you all do differently next year?
Interesting. I think, to start things off, I will start making sure that I write 2023 instead of 2022 starting next year. Yeah. John?
John Preto, now with AI for 2023.
No. You want to make sure you get that, get it on that foundational level there. Good thinking. Yeah. Nigel?
I've never been a great New Year's resolution type of person, partly because I try and think about the future I want to live into rather than the past that I've come from. And of course, at the end of the day, if it's worth doing now and not waiting till January the 1st. And if you ask me about my diet, I'll tell you that I don't apply that rule.
Yeah, I intend to stop procrastinating in 2023. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Less your muteds. I don't want to have as many of those as I had this past year. The other thing is that I want to ban corn sugar from my high fructose corn syrup from my diet. To me, it is the disastrous effect on humanity. So I'd like to ban that from my diet. So that's my diet contribution.
Could be reading labels. Stefan?
Yeah, I steal that from Marcus Brownlee. He said his New Year's resolution is 8K.
Nice. Okay. More Ks in the coming year. Yeah, so it's a good time to take a recollection and see where we've come. We will be doing some planning. I will say that our next week of Office Hours. We'll be looking forward as to the next quarter, at least, about what type of topics that we're going to be using. So stay tuned for next week's show, where we get to ask you. So if there's preferences that you have, that topics that you'd like to see us cover on the different days that we have, show up and put your questions in Mukana, and we'll take note of that. So this is just yet another way that you, the producers, get to dictate how the show goes and where it goes. Let's go to our next question.
And it's from Bob Sturtevant in San Antonio, Texas. Does anyone on the panel use some type of audio tech to help their pets handle the stress of the fireworks that are being fired off for New Year's?
Let's see. Go ahead, Mitchell.
They make a wrap. It's probably available in any of the pet centers, so you could rush out and get it today. That they wear it like a little sweater, and it makes them feel more comfortable during those times. The other thing is just sort of put them in your Zoom room. It's bound to be a little more soundproof. Some pets react to it differently. Yeah, it's called the Thunder Shirt. Thank you, Laura. It works great.
Nice. I wonder if there's some type of elaborate noise cancellation that you might be able to do. When it comes to noise, the low tech is putting a lot of mass between the noise and you. Tends to be the only thing, especially low frequency noises. You know, high frequency noises, there's lots of things you can do, but low frequency, usually putting lots of...
The boom gets them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, have a fireworks shelter. That might be helpful. And let's go to our next question.
And it's from Douglas Carmichael. The question, the Dead and Company tour used a classic 1992 Gamble EX66 console at front of house along with an Avid S6L digital console for backup. Wouldn't a patch bay on a live console be a maintenance nightmare? And how do you get support for something that esoteric?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm going to guess. I know I'm reaching here. I think it's tradition, especially if you're a Deadhead and you've been doing sound for the Grateful Dead, who had the best sound before anybody did. I mean, it used to be in the days when they did early concerts, they used to stack their instruments on the stage, and that would be about it. The Dead was the first to start putting big racks of gear, giant speakers, and other things up on the stage. So I would say that part of that includes staying with some equipment. And here's the thing. Old classic consoles that are made with discrete components just sound better.
Thanks, Mitchell. Let's go to our next question.
TJ Asher, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is there any alternative to the Sidus Link app for controlling my Aperture B7C lights?
One would guess that the reason you're looking for an alternate for the Sidus Link app, I found, is actually one of the better as far as controlling many of them. I have a small aperture light that uses it too. But as far as turning on that particular light, not certain whether there's another way to remotely control it. Of course, some of the lights will have a latching. If the lights can latch on, then you can use any number of IoT devices or just a simple switch. My back panel is a simple plug strip that turns on. Fireworks is a bonus here, but yeah, just simply having something. If you have a latching pieces of equipment, you can control it a number of different ways. But if you require, I would say that I would share your concern about sometimes even a great app that's Wi-Fi is tough to do. Bluetooth tends to be a better solution than having to pair with the Wi-Fi apps. What do you think, John?
I think you really clapped underneath your desk and you're using the clapper to turn those lights on and off.
Nice. Magicians never tell. Let's just say it, John. Yeah. So, yeah, hopefully that helps you out, TJ. Let's go to our next question.
Next question in from Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach and here on our panel. Where else have you found office hours content outside of the community?
Interesting. Harshit, have you found it anywhere else?
Run, catch, caught it. Okay, I pulled the Cochrane myself, and here we are. Touchdown. We were on Reddit. One of my friends lives up in New York, and he just happened to call me on this specific thing, and I was like, "Huh, what happened?" So our comms episode was on Reddit, and somebody was speaking of what comm systems they had compared to others, and they're like, "Hey, check this out." And so I just kind of wondered, with just where else have you seen a video or heard about us or any of the weird anomalies like that happened to you?
So they were commenting on our use of Unity. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So they were using our video to have the best explanation about comms, which was we use Unity. Clear Comms is another system that Alex has bought into. So I think it was in the Alex Lindsay channel specifically, but it's pretty cool to see that our videos are floating about in the community. And even Keely mentioned that she watched Mix Minus video, for example. So it's good help out there to pass these videos along.
Yeah, I have heard people say that when they want to show what is the potential that a Zoom meeting can reach, oftentimes people point to office hours and say, look, this is all Zoom contribution. At one time it was just a webinar, but now we have a little more fancy bells and whistles. But of course, our contribution method here is using Zoom at its core, just a 1080p version of it. Go ahead, John.
So there was a real reporter that did a story on office hours, and I'm trying to find it on the inner tubes now, and it's not coming up. But we've been on PC Mag. We've been on several of the tech websites because of Alex's relationship with MacBreak Weekly. But I'm trying to find this real article. I don't know if it was New York Times or something like that, but I'll find it.
Yeah, now that you mention it, John, it occurs to me. I think they interviewed one of our members there in it. But yeah, it was a major news outlet. Harshit, sorry, did you have something? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Continue on. Lost it.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, the pyrotechnician for our live shows, his father was a little bit starstruck when he found out that I was on the panel.
Nice. What geography is that?
We're in California.
California? Okay. Yeah. Nice. So yeah, there's the some of our tutorials and usage of things. I know some of the folks in our community made their own little, like, how to improve your audio and video contributions. But when we have a second hour on a topic, it's a great encapsulated thing, which is what we try to do. Is when we have a topic, if we really focus in on, we talked about being concise, right? So if in our programming, we really get focused in on a specific topic, people that are searching for our content, they can, search for it. They're looking for that specific topic, and then have a very concise and drilled down, discussion about that topic. So it's helpful for us. You'll notice in some of our themes for second hours, we're not going to go too broad as far as the topics, but we really want to be a definitive source so we can get, deep into a topic as opposed to just having a general discussion about a topic. And that's how you make content that has a more evergreen shelf life than just a simple discussion. So it's something that could be of use for the community. Go ahead, Harshit.
Yeah, so definitely it has a protein in the content. And sorry, I'm just going to continue on.
Yeah, no worries. But so it's something that's we think about this as being our conversation right here and now, but we can't think about how this information is helpful for people that want to talk about it elsewhere. Let's go to our next question.
And it's from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, are there any online New Year's celebration to compete with the typical TV network fetes?
Mitchell?
I am so tired. I'm sorry, this is going to sound like a rant. I'm so tired of what the networks are putting up there and consider it to be entertainment leading up to the ball dropping in New York. Putting Anderson Cooper and some comedian, I don't know who it is this year, he's just a fish out of water. He's a newscaster. He has his reputation to maintain, and yet here he is, a fish out of water, acting kind of silly. So I think that the other issue is that the TV broadcasters are now being asked to consume less libations during the celebration because they got sort of incomprehensible. And I guess I could peek at Ryan Seacrest for a while, but I'm just Seacrest out. So that's going to drive me to the internet. And why don't we just gather on after hours and we'll have our own little celebration, and we don't have to depend on other, internet-related entertainment like cats doing silly things.
No, that's online. So there you go. Let's go to our next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota, asking, what is the best way to put your iPhone into your ATEM without wires?
Jesse.
The best way, I don't know if it's possible to do it with entirely without wires, but right now my iPhone is currently wireless, and I've got it transmitting to the newest OS Ventura, and you should be able to see that we've got that in the ATEM. That's camera 3 on the ATEM. Here's the overhead camera 2, and back to camera 1.
Nice. Nigel?
So I guess one of the ways you could do this is continuity camera into a Mac and then make it, share the Mac through your HDMI cable. And that would be a way to solve that.
Also a good suggestion. Mitchell?
NDI works well. AirPlay can work well. They're all wireless, so that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Now, of course, you can get the direct cable as well. As we mentioned, let's go to our next question.
Next one in from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. What's the best roll-your-own home security system?
John?
Yeah, 2 years ago, we purchased a German Shepherd Poodle mix. She was kind of costly, but worth it.
Nigel?
So Paul and I have this conversation often. Don't buy the best. Buy the one that integrates with everything else you have. Because if you buy the best of everything, you get a complete mess. I'll tell you that integration starts with point solutions, islands of automation, and then real integration. And the best way, if you want an integrated system, is start thinking integration and go that way. You can always find one technical solution that's slightly better than the others, or the camera has a slightly higher definition or something. But if it doesn't all work together and you can't manage it, then it really doesn't matter.
And Mitchell?
I like Nest. That's pretty good for that. Ring. And by the way, Shaquille O'Neal owns a big piece of that. He's also their pitch man. So there's a lot of systems that you can consider to be roll your own. But talking cameras, I think that's what Paul likes to use. I don't know what brand he uses.
Fantastic. And John?
I do. He's a Wise user. So Wise is the best security system on the low end. It's super great value. For the price of those cameras, for what you get is a great value. At the high end, it's Axis, AXIS.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, our panel, for providing a source for our community to reach out. Thank you for all of your questions. We also appreciate everyone that's working on the show. We'll get more into that as we roll our ending credits. But this is the end of our show. Our second part is our focus on education, and John will be handling that. John, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Josh. During Education Hour, our panel will be discussing different ways that you can draw on your screen or camera feed specifically. The technical term for this is telestration, but we'll be talking about how you can get that same effect at various price points and different equipment levels. The show will resume in about 5 minutes after a short break.
Happy New Year, Mickey.
Good morning, Erin and Tony.
Good morning.
John, I'm in for reading, and I'm happy to give it to somebody else if they prefer to do it. Erin, I think you generally like to read, but I'll stick for the second hour if you need me.
I'll be happy to read.
Okay, I'll inform the back end so they know that. I know you do it well, and you generally do it for this category.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
And Miss Champion Walker, it's good to hear your voice.
All right, Erin, you are confirmed and good to go.
One minute to education. 1 minute.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Education Hour. Education Hour is our once-a-week hour during office hours where we talk about topics that matter to our educators, specifically our K-12 teachers, but for anyone who wants to instruct anyone else. And today, since it's a hot topic frequently, we wanted to talk a little bit about drawing on your screen, or annotating, or sometimes called telestrating. So we'll have a great conversation led by our questions put forth by our producers about the best ways to draw on your screen, including different techniques you can use at different price points. Let's go ahead and get started with a few questions. So Erin, what's our first question?
Our first question comes to us from John Failer from Greenfield, Massachusetts. I work at a makerspace that has a Google Jamboard that uses UV pens. When I plug in a Windows laptop, it essentially becomes a 55-inch 4K touchscreen, but the pens no longer work. Any ideas on how to make the UV pens work?
I did a little bit of research on this during the previous hour, and the most common answers I saw to that personally were check your graphics drivers, especially for Windows 10 machines. And that seems to fix the problem because a lot of people, when they draw on it, they don't see the drawings on their own screen, but other people can. The other thing to watch out for is make sure you have any application software installed, but I've never used a Jamboard myself. Erin?
So while I have not used I have a Promethean board at school, and we use our Chromebooks. But what I've noticed is that sometimes when teachers plug in their Chromebooks or other devices from home and then try to use an Apple Pencil or some other type of device, you've had to go into settings and make sure that all the mirroring is on and things to that nature. We've also had a few issues every now and then where the pens aren't connected with the Promethean, which is, I guess, maybe similar to this. And honestly, just turning it off and turning it back on again usually will get the pens to work.
The old troubleshooting tip that works for almost everything. Plug it in, replug it back in. Thanks, Erin. What's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. What's the quickest, easiest way to use an iPad Pro with the new pencil to draw on a screen in Zoom?
I'm glad you asked, Paul, because one of the 4 ways that I was going to make sure that we talked about today is using an app called Video Pencil. But Tony, would you like to share your thoughts?
Absolutely. I'm just going to demonstrate using Video Pencil. So I am writing Video Pencil. Office hours. Didn't work that time. Let's change colors. Office hours.
And Tony, what do you think are some of the main benefits to using the Video Pencil app?
So what I'm using is, this is an iPad Pro M1. It has the Video Pencil app on it. And on my Mac Mini, there's a free application that you can download called Video Pencil Camera. So in Zoom, once it's installed, you will select Video Camera app in the Zoom, and then you will turn on Video Pencil app on your iPad, and they see each other. And you can clear, you can change colors, pens, markers, and you guys can't see it, but there's a lot of different tools. So if I say Video Pencil, didn't work that time, I'm going to clear. Video Pencil. So I'm writing it this time instead of saying it. Okay.
Yeah, Video Pencil and Michael Forrest's other app, Shoot Camera, have a feature where it will take your microphone and transcribe it into text on your screen after you do a specific gesture. That it can be a little tricky, especially drawing with a pencil. John, did you have something else to add?
Since I know Paul likes to do everything the hard way, I've known Paul for many years now. And for at least 3 years, I use Procreate on my iPad with the green screen behind it, and I bring that into OBS, and then I composite it out and bring it into Zoom. It's an old school way.
So, John, for our teachers who maybe aren't as familiar with things like OBS or green screen compositing out, can you explain that in terms that maybe someone less familiar with the topic might understand?
I said that tongue in cheek just to make Paul mad a little bit because he likes to play around a little bit. So the hard thing was getting the pencil feed into the computer, and so you have to run a third-party application. I use OBS because it's free. It runs way better on PC than it does on Mac. But there's another piece of software we need to run in order to get the screen from the iPad into OBS, which is an NDI feed. So this way, super cumbersome. Video Pencil's way easier. But in the old days, this is how we had to do it. We had to run multiple pieces of software, composite that into OBS, and then run a green screen on that, and then feed that into Zoom. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think one thing that really helps understand what's happening in the process, especially when drawing on a camera feed, is the camera feed and the drawing are always two separate layers. You're not drawing directly on a camera feed. You're either using some piece of software that overlays over the top of it, and then you might need software to remove the background of whatever you're drawing on top of it. So we can talk about some of those different options as well here in a little bit. But Tony, did you have something else to add?
I just wanted to add that I am using both Video Pencil and the Shoot app in my setup. So you are seeing me using the Shoot app as a video camera. I'm sorry, as a webcam, and I'm using Video Pencil to demonstrate. So I'm using both products.
Great. Erin?
So I don't know if we'll be getting to this later, but I have two apps that I use, especially when I was remote. Would you like me to share those or wait until a little later?
Go ahead and share them.
Okay. So when I was remote, the biggest thing that I used was either Notability, or lately I've been using GoodNotes. And what I would do is I would have a worksheet or something that my students were working on, and I would use my downstream key on my ATEM Mini to pop it up on the screen over where I was, and then I would be able to draw right on it so that they could see what they were working on in real time, like that. I typically did not use the drawing directly on the layer, but if I did, I would make sure that my background was black. Let me make my text a little bit thicker. And made sure I had a bright color that the kids could see. But then I always had difficulty figuring out which way I was supposed to be so they could see the writing. But the first way was the biggest way that I used with GoodNotes and with Notability.
And so, Erin, there we can see a little bit of a transparent rectangle in your background. Is that intentional? And how did you achieve that effect?
So the way that I achieved that was that with the page with the direct worksheet or the reading on it, it was just a direct picture that I dropped into the app. But when I was using, when I was writing over the screen, I changed my background to black so that they could see that it was a little bit transparent, like they could still see something, but it wasn't always super visible. So I'm working on that one because I haven't used that exact app in a couple months. But when I figure that out, I'll let you know.
And are you using? Did you say you were using a downstream key for that?
Yes. So on my ATEM Mini, it's kind of a different setup than what I had originally. But whenever I would click that specific button, that's what would appear on the screen. But usually it would be its own input, so you wouldn't actually even see me at all in it. It would just be that my iPad would take up the entire input.
Fantastic. And I think one of the biggest benefits of using an iPad as your input device is the native drawing tools for iPad are significantly better than almost anything you can get on a PC or Mac application. And I think it's because Apple's done so much work in making sure that those pen strokes feel natural, so the strokes have a real natural weight to them. And like Michael Forst's Video Pencil app, that uses just the native drawing tools. And one of the great things about that particular app is you can either draw straight on your camera feed using the camera app that Tony was talking about if you have both a Mac and an iPad. So it maybe doesn't suit all teachers. But if you have those two things, the app itself is $40, and it gives you some really great drawing tools. And you can preview on your iPad your camera feed, this is the first app I've seen do that. So what you can do is draw on your iPad and you see what you're drawing on, and so you can avoid your own body and that sort of thing. Secondly, you have these great drawing tools. One negative to Video Pencil is it doesn't have any shapes, so you can't draw straight lines or rectangles or ellipses yet. And the other thing I noticed is that sometimes when you're drawing, especially putting it into Zoom as a virtual camera, you can get some weird white flecks, especially around certain curves. And I think that just has to do with how it's figuring out what to add on top of the video feed and what to remove. So those are some things to watch out for when you're using Video Pencil. But I would agree for most people who have an iPad and a Mac, that's probably the best choice for drawing straight on your camera feed. One other great thing about Video Pencil is you can actually select still media as well. So you can bring in a picture from your camera roll or from a document and telestrate directly onto that document, and it goes through your webcam settings on your computer. Another great thing about Video Pencil is that it shows up as a virtual camera, so it can be used in any application that uses virtual cameras. It can even be used in PowerPoint. So if you want a live video feed in a PowerPoint presentation, you can use Video Pencil as the input into the PowerPoint Cameo, is the function there. And so you can draw straight on your PowerPoint as well, which is something unique to PowerPoint. Keynote cannot do virtual cameras yet, but PowerPoint can. So those are a few features of Video Pencil. Go ahead, Erin.
I figured it out. So when I'm on Notability, that's something I haven't used in a very long time. When I put my black background up and I click my downstream key, there is the background with no transparency. So I think it was just a GoodNotes issue.
So maybe you didn't have a pure black background or something when you were using your key. Tony.
And I just wanted to add one last thing. So because I'm using an ATEM Mini Pro, I can actually use Video Pencil to write on a video through my Apple TV. So, for example, I could pull up a Netflix movie, play it in the Zoom meeting, and actually write on it. I played around with, I had a original Star Trek series on, and I was writing while the video was actually playing in the Zoom meeting. I was writing Vulcan, Captain Kirk, actually while the series was playing. So that's another use case. You can use your Apple Pencil with an ATEM to actually write on live video. And so I wouldn't do that now because of copyright issues, but it's pretty cool to be able to do that.
Awesome. And Tony, I'm actually noticing you're drawing your squiggle there. I did not have those white artifacts that I was getting on mine. So maybe there's something with the color I was choosing or something for Video Pencil. So that's, I think, the quickest, easiest way. Now, not all of us have iPads or pencils. There are also free ways to telestrate or to draw on your screen or your camera feed. And the easiest one I can think of is Zoom itself. Some people don't know this, but if you are sharing your screen, then Zoom has some annotation features. So first you have to share a screen, and then on your Zoom toolbar, there will be a feature to annotate. And there's some very basic line drawing tools there, as well as rectangles and circles. And you can choose your colors, and you can even select the items and move them around, which you can also do in Video Pencil. Not every app lets you move a drawing after you've drawn it. So that's one free tool that most of us have if you're in a Zoom meeting. Teams has a similar feature as well. If you're not in a Zoom meeting, you can always use your presentation software like Keynote and PowerPoint. Both have the ability to draw on your presentation. And they're very limited drawing tools. They're just a simple pen or highlighter. And they're not as good. For Keynote, you do need to have a separate device to use as the remote in order to draw on the screen for a Keynote presentation. But I wanted to make sure that we also consider free versions as well. So those are 2 free options you have when you're talking about telestration. And then the fourth one that I had mentioned earlier was what Erin's alluded to, which is called a downstream key. We can get back into these if our producers have any questions about those 4 different techniques or others. Please make sure you put them in the chat. We'd be happy to dive deeper on any of these topics. But Erin, what's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from John Filer in Greenfield, Massachusetts. I have previously seen teachers making a smartboard out of a projector and an old Wii remote. Anyone have any experience with this?
That seems like a real MacGyver move. I'm trying to think of like what even you could do with that. Now I know the old Wii remote had the ability to like make a little hand, and it senses where you're pointing. It's just an infrared remote, but I'm not sure how you would turn that into a smartboard. So I apologize that I don't have a better answer, but that sounds really intriguing. If you have any information on that or YouTube videos on how they did that, I, for one, would be really interested in learning more about that. Erin, what's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from David Brady from New York City. For anyone looking to dip a toe into scan processing, check this out. There's more than one way to draw on a screen, and they give us a YouTube link.
Go ahead, John.
This is I have my one of my bachelor's degrees is in electronics, a double E, and I've got a scope sitting out in my garage, and I challenged Alex. Are you listening? I challenged Alex to get our scopes working. So I'm going to put my scope over here. I hope it will fit over here. And then running this software on your PC, you can generate these patterns and then feed this back into the oscilloscope. So this looks like a really fun project. It's a little out of this scope, but it's a fun project.
Yeah, so sounds like a visualization based off of the noise something hears. Is that what the oscilloscope part of it has to do with, John?
Exactly correct. Yeah.
Well, you build your own equalizer almost. That's a really interesting idea. And I'm trying to think of how you might be able to use that in education, but drawing on screen is more than just illustrating on top of your camera. It's anything you do that enables you to be interactive in what you're presenting to students, whether in a classroom setting or in a Teams meeting. Go ahead, John.
Hey, John, this isn't the proper place to say this, but I wanted to fit it in because I can't find any questions that resemble this kind of technique that I've seen. I just, over the holidays, I was sick for like a week and I was in bed. I took the CS50 class from Harvard. I don't know if you've ever watched that one. Their technique for teaching was really interesting, which was a hybrid. So he had 300 or 400 people in his auditorium, and all he had was one giant screen on top of his head, a desk with 2 laptops that were connected to a big, like an 85-inch screen, and he prepared everything on his keynote. So he had no whiteboard, no smart boards, anything else. That's how they teach this entire class, and I thought it was super effective and super efficient. I don't know if that's a similar technique that teachers are using these days or not.
Yeah, I think one of the tools that was pretty consistent for teachers to have is a screen in the classroom that they can present to. Now, not every teacher has that, but most teachers have at least a PC or a Mac, less likely, and the ability to show something to all their students. And so one question might be, how can we use that in things like make unique presentations or slide decks and integrate other tools to be able to have a more interactive drawing? And so, yeah, I think most teachers do have some ability to share a screen in the classroom. And if not, if the students have devices, there's also online tools where you can share your screen virtually as well. I think actually both PowerPoint and Keynote have that ability, as well as a whole bunch of other online presentation tools. That could be if you were like a Chromebook classroom, for example. And so I'd be interested to any questions that we have for that, or any teachers who have any thoughts on how you might use that. Erin, what's our next question coming up?
Our next question comes to us from Craig McFarlane in Boston. Any experience on the panel using the Insta360 Link's whiteboard focus feature?
I did not get an Insta360 for Christmas this year, unfortunately, but I have seen some demonstrations using the whiteboard feature. And what the whiteboard feature, the biggest function the feature allows is it gives you 4 stickers that you put on the corners of your whiteboard, and the Insta360 camera will detect where your whiteboard is. And specifically, if your whiteboard's askew, it can do some basic keystoning, I think, to make sure that it's correcting for any skewness in your camera, as well as focusing right on, on your whiteboard, as well as focusing right on the whiteboard, so that if you are using a physical whiteboard, the camera points right at it. Now, my personal experience using whiteboards in virtual meetings is the glare from lights is almost always a factor at some point. And so it's almost not worth it for me to use a physical whiteboard because it's so hard for my audience to be able to read it. And I've tried quite a few different whiteboards, marker combinations, positioning, and it's never quite as good as being able to either use a virtual whiteboard in like a Microsoft Teams or just drawing directly on the screen with some sort of telestration software. So I'd be curious if anyone has used the 360 Link and how it works and how it performs with a whiteboard. Specifically, can you see the drawing, which is where I think most people struggle with that, especially because of glare. Next question.
Our next question comes to us from John Failer in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Has anyone tried out the app Epic Pen for Windows? It's simple and works best if your computer is touch screen and has an active pen. With a Stream Deck for hotkeys, it's much better. Only downside is that the app needs to be in focus.
Yeah, I was checking this out. I personally don't use Windows that often. I'm using my Mac, and there's several applications on the Mac that are similar. But this does look like a really well-rounded application you can use, especially if you want to use your Windows PC as a telestration for a Luma key or a chroma key. And now's a good time as any to talk about that. So I'm going to share my screen really quick, and I'll give kind of the rough overview of what happens with a chroma key. And so I'm sharing one of my desktops. And what I use for my Luma key and for myself to draw on the screen is I just have a black desktop. And I use several apps. I used to use an app called Presentify, but I found out late last night that Presentify has changed it so all of their drawing tools are semi-transparent, which does not work great. It just makes everything look muddy. So I found a new app for my Mac. It was called Brush Pen or something like that. I'll get the name and I'll put it into notes. And I have that coordinated with or Screen Brush, excuse me. I have that coordinated with my Stream Deck as well. So I push a button on my Stream Deck and it puts me into drawing mode. And I can just draw straight on my screen. And it has some pencils. It has the ability to draw straight lines if you would like, or you can draw an arrow if you need to point to a specific thing, as well as rectangles and ovals. And I think those are key. For me personally, I need the ability to draw a regular shape. You can also undo and move items as well. So how a Luma key works is you're just drawing on a black screen. And then when you run the black screen with the drawing into your ATEM menu, for example, or into your OBS, the hardware or software tool basically takes your screen and says, take everything on the screen and remove anything that's black. So it becomes a transparent screen with just a shape. And when you apply that onto your camera, the rest of my black background is transparent and you get a yellow rectangle. So that's how the Luma key function of an ATEM Mini works, or OBS can also do the same thing. But how I use it is I actually use a drawing tablet. And how a drawing tablet works is pretty similar. Basically, you have the tablet, and the tablet itself you can think of as having its own 2 layers. And the first layer is the video feed to the tablet. And this is what you see on the screen when you draw. And the top layer is the input screen. And for most people, when they're using a drawing tablet, they just connect their tablet into their PC or Mac. And the Mac gives its desktop to the video layer of the tablet. And then the tablet is it's just a full screen touch screen of the Mac or the PC. So whatever you touch, wherever you touch on your tablet, your computer thinks you're clicking a mouse in that same spot. And so how it works is basically I'm going to switch up my video feed so that instead of being the computer screen that goes to my video feed, all I do is I take the input from my ATEM My ATEM video comes from my camera. So I'll draw my little camera here. So my camera goes into my ATEM. That video feed goes into my tablet. My tablet then goes into my Mac. And then my Mac gives that black screen that you saw earlier to my ATEM. And then my ATEM combines the video feed from my camera and my Mac together in a LumaKey. And that's how I get the drawing on my screen. And any software that can draw on a black screen can be used in a LumaKey. And the main power to using a LumaKey instead of like a video pencil is you have complete control. You don't need any special software because I can control what feeds into my ATEM and what comes out of my ATEM perfectly. And so that's why I personally use a graphics tablet instead of something different, is for me it gives me more control and I don't have to worry about anything like that. So that's how I personally draw on the screen. But like we said, there's various different ways that we can do it. And I will stop my share. So that being said, Mark Giuliani.
So just like you demonstrated, with the tablet, you can use other backgrounds too. So you can roll out Google Earth if you're talking to contractors and architects about developing a site, and then just draw right over that on the tablet. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Thanks. What's our next question, Erin?
Our next question comes to us from John Foltz in Selins Grove, Pennsylvania. If we have time, can Erin describe her experiences with EduProtocols? I've been experimenting with them for use with college students.
Go ahead, Erin.
So I've loved using EduProtocols the past couple months. One of the ones that we use the most with my students is called 8 Parts. And 8 Parts is, let me see if I can pull that up. So 8 Parts is where I show the students a picture, and then they have to fill out the boxes for the verbs, the adverbs, nouns and adjectives, and all the other parts of speech. And then in that middle part, they're able to write a short paragraph or a short story based on the picture that they see. And I have to say that the way that teachers usually have to teach grammar is doing, common nouns for a week, then proper nouns for a week. And then we get into pronouns and object pronouns, subject pronouns. And it takes a while to go through all the different parts of speech and then trying to loop back to that right before testing time. They forget what all the first, 3 months of school's grammar lessons were. But with 8 Parts, if we did it at least 2 or 3 times a week, they're introduced and reminded of them weekly, and they're using all 8 parts of speech. I've had students ask to do grammar. And they actually asked me once while the superintendent and the assistant superintendent was in the room. They were pretty impressed. So that's one of the parts that I use pretty frequently. The other one that I've been using a lot is Iron Chef. I do have an example of one that I use. I don't know how clearly it's going to be shown. So this one we did around Halloween, and it was all about candy. So what I did, and it's a very basic template that we're able to use. So you can give them an article, you can give them a video. So I did videos. The first video was how Skittles are made. And then they give me 3 facts about how they're made. They put in a picture. And then the secret ingredient for this one was, what's your favorite type of candy? We've also done this with science topics. So that way you're able to pull in different types of content. But that template is already made. It's already made. And a lot of times with older students, you can say, your topic is thunderstorms. Your topic is, coding this type of thing. And they're able to do research on their own and link their article so that you're doing even less work as the teacher. It's a lot of just student-led practices that they're able to use to help themselves and each other learn the content material. So Those are the two ones I use the most frequently, but I've been starting to use some other ones that I think, they're going to start to ask for by name because they're fun. Once they learn how to do it the first one or two times, it's very easy. So then all they're really focusing on is the content.
Great. Thanks, Erin, for that update. What's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Can I use Video Pencil with Windows?
Go ahead, Tony.
The short answer is no, you can't. But what you can do is, since you have an iPad, this, by the way, is Michael Forrest's actual page. And this is Squares TV. And I was actually going to scroll up on it. So let's do it this way. So these are all the different applications on it. But what I wanted you to know was that you can use your iPad and write directly on your iPad. So you can use it independent of the actual Windows machine. You can use your iPad with Video Pencil and do your writing using just the iPad. So that's an option.
Thanks. Yeah, there are various ways, and it's a little tricky depending on how this question's written. Video Pencil is an iPad app, but you can take the output from Video Pencil and you can use that in Windows if, for example, you had an ATEM mini switcher as a physical way to do that. But I believe Video Pencil can also export as a NDI source, which is a way to send a camera signal over a network. And any Windows app that can pick up an NDI camera should be able to pick up the Video Pencil source. Now, it won't have this same integration with your webcam necessarily because it doesn't have the Video Pencil camera app on PC that I've seen. So it depends a little bit on your setup, but there are ways to have some functionality from Video Pencil that you can use with Windows. Erin, what's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. The NFL uses Microsoft Surface tablets to not only access historical data, but for live analysis of plays and telestrating. How would they get the video out of them for broadcast? USB-C to HDMI to SDI?
Douglas, I think that's a great question to ask one of our other days of the week where we have video specialists. I'm not sure. I'm sure that they are not using Video Pencil for live telestration. My understanding is a lot of network-based telestrating uses dedicated hardware, and I'm sure that they would have some sort of network-based camera like an NDI or an SDI and have that ability to get into an actual telestrating device. But I don't know the answer to that directly or thoroughly. Next question.
Our next question comes to us from Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida. Can we discuss ways to actually share art drawing as an artist?
We sure can. Do any of our panelists have suggestions on how you would share your drawing as an artist? Go ahead, Tony.
I am not an artist, but what I will say is that I have seen. I've had a guest, Dan Flores, who is an artist, and several other artists have been on Conversation with Tony Mobley. It is really about your familiarity with the tools that you use that really shows how your art coming forth. And I would encourage you to, whatever medium you use, just to continue to share it that way. If I was a decent artist, I could use Video Pencil, or I could use one of the I mentioned Dan Flores. He uses the Microsoft now I forgot the name of it, drawing tablet, Windows computer, and the art that he does on that Windows device, is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It really has more to do with the artists themselves than I would say any tools, because the artists will make the tools work for them with familiarity.
Thanks, Tony. Go ahead, Erin.
So I'm wondering if I'm hoping I'm answering the question the way it should be. One of my students, when we were remote a couple of years ago, was obsessed with Procreate. So she was able to connect her device to her setup somehow. I don't remember how she did it, but she was able to draw on the screen and let kids see what she was doing. It actually became a great breakout space where students would say, "Oh, can you draw me? Can you draw me?" And she would draw them as anime characters or things like that. But I think that's one way to share if you're actually physically drawing on the screen.
That's really interesting. Was she an art teacher or just a teacher who was an artist?
Oh, no, this was a student.
Oh, student. Sorry, I totally misheard you. That's fascinating. I was thinking, what you made me think is, I wonder if in an art class, the teachers, how they share their technique, like to the whole class. Are they using overhead cameras and they're drawing on physical paper and that's sharing onto like a screen somewhere? Or are they using something like a Procreate or a tablet sketching tool and having that display on a computer screen in the classroom? Because when I was in art class, basically the art teacher walked around to every student and drew the same thing on each of our pieces of paper, and it must have taken him 10 times as long because of that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I saw Tony raise his hand. Did you have something else, other thoughts, Erin?
Well, I know when my art teacher was remote, she had to do something similar to that. If she wanted to draw live, she had to have a document camera that was hooked up to her Chromebook. One source that I know a lot of teachers use, and I use even in the classroom sometimes, it's a YouTube channel called Art Kids Hub or Art Hub Kids. And it's a father and son that draw something together, and they go through step by step how to draw it. So the father will start to make it and then the son will copy. And my students have made some great art with that.
Awesome. Tony?
Yeah, it was Microsoft Surface was the device that I couldn't remember for whatever reason. I also wanted to mention Dan Flores again. He does a thing he does during the week with his grandchildren, and they get on LinkedIn and Facebook and they draw. And so it's an amazing thing to see them. Their interaction is phenomenal, but also the fact that they are actually creating art and doing different things. And it's just awesome. So if you get a chance to check him out, it's Dan Flores.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of different ways to share your art. For example, I think most people probably share their art in Instagram these days, especially our adolescents. You can also share it on DeviantArt. I saw somebody in the chat, Jack Cannon in the chat, suggested deviantart.com. Now those sources don't protect your art. And I think if you actually want to protect your art, where we'll see in the future, the easiest way to do that will be by using an NFT system to be able to basically put a permanent watermark on the art itself, so you can verify what the original is and use that for checking for appropriate use in the future. It's a totally different conversation, but those are some ways you can share your art. What's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. What are some do's and don'ts when writing on screen? Color choice, fonts, others?
Go ahead, Mark.
So you want to pick a color that's in contrast to what your background is and makes it easy to read. Sometimes the background just needs to be a plain background. And sometimes if you bring other sources in, let me just switch cameras here for a second. You want to have as you can see this now, can you guys see that? Yeah, you can. So you can see the color green works well over a map trying to point out something, but also it works somewhat well in a background like mine. But there are other times when I know I'm going to be doing a lot of presenting, and I'll just put a gray backdrop up.
And do you find are there any particular rules, Mark, for architecture and marking up architecture drawings or anything like that?
There are some software packages that are designed that already have tools that architects are used to. One of them is called Bluebeam. And so if you can put Bluebeam, which is a PDF reader, open up the PDF drawing in that, it has a lot of tools that architects are familiar with for marking up drawings, clouds, and things like that.
Great. Erin, what do you think are best practices?
Best practices are similar to what Mark said, making sure that you have a very different contrasting color to what you're working with. So whenever I was working on a black screen, I would usually use like hot pink, a medium to bright orange, yellow, or white. If I was drawing on a white background with a worksheet, it could really be any color at that point. But something that I did notice the first few times I was using it was, so I used to use Notability and GoodNotes for things like journaling or planning and things like that. So I would be writing in a very thin pencil style for myself because I'm the only one that's reading it. But I noticed when I didn't change that for my students, they were like, Miss Graham, I can barely see. Can you write bigger? So I had to change the font or the pencil to like a medium to large writing font so that it wouldn't be too small for them to see. So I would say definitely a bright color and use a thicker pen or pencil stroke.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognize that your audience is likely viewing your feed on something different than a full screen computer. And so you want to have something that can be viewable on something very small, like a cell phone, or something tucked away in a corner of a screen, like someone who might minimize their screen. So I would agree with the contrast and size being really important. And also, I think that brings up a whole different set of questions about how do we make drawing accessible, especially someone who's visually impaired. And that's something that maybe we can talk about as well. I think one of the keys there that I've been trying to do myself, and I actually didn't practice it, so I apologize, is describing what you're drawing. And when I had my drawing of the graphics tablet, I should have said, on this first rectangle, this represents my graphics tablet, instead of just saying, here's a graphics tablet, and just assuming that people could see it. Because you don't know if the person even has the screen up in front of them. Like, you can't just assume that. If you're a teacher in a classroom, sometimes you can require it. But in my experience, not everyone does what they're required to do either. So those are some other considerations to have. Erin, do we have another question?
Yes, we do. We have one from Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Is there a way to use my iPad to draw on screen using vMix on Windows? I'd like to draw on the iPad and have the drawing be overlaid onto the vMix output window.
Go ahead, Harshit.
I wanted to speak on the previous question, but I'll pass.
Oh, go ahead and speak on the previous question, and then we'll come back to this one.
I'll come back to it.
All right. vMix on Windows. Go ahead, John Preto.
So I would run Procreate on the iPad, and then I would run NDI. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier for vMix specifically. So Procreate running on the iPad, and then NDI tools on the iPad, and you could feed that directly into vMix and chroma key out the drawing, or Luma key it out, either one of those ways. But that will work perfectly.
And John, does it have to be a virtual camera? What kinds of cameras can vMix bring into it?
NDI, it will bring an NDI image in from the iPad. So they're both on the same network. Bring NDI into vMix.
And I assume OBS has almost this very similar functions and features, and it would work very similarly. But
exactly.
My understanding is vMix is stronger, more powerful.
vMix is more professional-ish. A huge community running OBS on the PC side. 90% of what you see on Twitch is OBS, and so they've got lots of hours of live streaming on OBS. If you're running on a PC, then you can use OBS. But if she's already got vMix, run vMix. It accepts NDI as input, so you can feed that directly into vMix.
Great, thank you, Tony.
I just wanted to add that there's a lot of conversation in the chat, and Chris Sabato and Chad LaForge are both mentioning different ways in which you can use Video Pencil as far as with vMix. So she needs to check that out as well.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out, Tony. And make sure you're paying attention to our chat because there's lots of great answers to our questions showing up there. We don't have any other questions on deck right now. So if any panelists would like to give a last word, Harshit, if you wanted to share, go ahead. One more question's coming through. Go ahead, Erin. What's our last question?
Right, pulling up the question. Okay, our question comes to us from Harshid in Daytona Beach, Florida. What have you learned in the year as far as accessibility, and especially with your corporate or education environments?
I have learned a lot. A lot of it has been from other people in office hours, including Harshid and Laura, just pointing out when things I've done they weren't able to be a part of, and helping me understand how can I better make sure that the information I'm sharing is accessible to them. But also that's directly impacted me at work. For the first time at work this year, we had one person come who has a vision impairment, and we had to totally change how we train this person. And it turned out she wasn't able to perform the call center functions of our role, so we actually moved her into a different position. But it was because of the support and understanding I had, and I even asked Harshid directly, like, hey, how can I help this person? It helped me be more empathetic to her needs, as well as think about how do we serve her. And it's important mostly because it's the right thing to do, but it's also the legal thing to do. So I was really appreciative to have that feedback myself. Mitchell?
I thought what you said, John, makes a lot of sense and resonates with me. As a sometimes web designer, I've been known to skip over alt tags just because I'm so busy and I got to do other things. But now that I have friends here on office hours and friends that go beyond accessibility, it's more important to be more sensitive to that, or you said empathetic, and I think that's exactly the word. I'm more empathetic and much less likely to skip things like that, be much more sensitive to those needs, because that makes you a better citizen, too.
Thanks, Mitchell. Erin, what's our next question?
Our next question comes to us from James Babbitt in San Diego. Do these solutions draw on a screen that shows the actual video so you can see where you're drawing?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, so some of the tablets are actually monitors so that you can actually draw a shape just by looking. So right now I see myself on the tablet and I'm just drawing a very poor quality drawing.
Yeah, and that's what I was describing is with the graphics tablets that have an HDMI in, you can put whatever HDMI in it you want. So for the ATEM mini solution, yes, it does. Tony?
So I'm using the ATEM Mini, and you can see that I'm drawing on my logo of Conversation with Tony Mobley. And I'm going to do like Mark. I'm going to go around my head and around my glasses and my nose and my mouth. So I'm not very good either, but you can see everywhere that you need to, because I can see the screen. You can see my bookcases up here. So around my mic. So yeah, you can pretty much see everywhere you need to draw. Now, I'm using the ATEM, the iPad, and the Mac, M1 Mac Mini.
And you're seeing your camera feed on your iPad in the Video Pencil app, correct?
Absolutely. What you are seeing me, I have selected Video Pencil app in Zoom. And so it is bringing over in my ATEM Mini, in port 1 is the Shoot app, iPhone, and that is my everyday daily driver for video, me being on video as a webcam. And then I am switching to Video Pencil camera, virtual camera in Zoom. And so it shows what you guys see on my iPad. And then I am able to draw on the iPad everything that I can see in my background.
Awesome.
Mitchell? So it works great.
I'm really fascinated with what we're talking about here in this hour and the drawing and the apps and all the add-ons. But the only thing I haven't seen yet is something that will make me a better artist. I'm very afraid to draw badly, so I haven't done it quite yet.
Well, and when you're on a screen, your arm's way out, so it's even harder to draw, and it's a screen, so it's not like drawing on paper. Not that I was good at drawing on paper either. Harshit?
Yeah, let's not talk about AI and where that could probably take us in that realm. But I wanted to take both from the previous question of accessibility learned and then this question, even with video. As you mentioned that Tony started talking about the emotions that he was drawing on his glasses, his logo. And it started building a picture in my head. So he was illustrating in my brain, basically, like, oh, okay, that's what he's doing. Oh, he moved over here. So, it's the power of words and just usability in everyday. He didn't change much. He just started talking about what he was doing. And so what the previous question stated and what I've learned is just sharing and then committing to it. It's just if you're presenting a video, commit to it and express what you want to express in that video. So if you commit to what you're going to say in the first screen and then say, okay, look at the left, we're going to look at the logo. Look at the middle, we're going to look at the meat of the paper. At the bottom, you see it says sincerely, that's the signature. And then you have a footer, you have a header. So when you're just saying these little key phrases, you know where the placement is on a piece of paper or a document. So it's always important, and even with video, to represent just explanations or making things understandable.
Thank you for sharing that, Harshit. Mark?
Well, I thought I would just show people in the ATEM how to set this up so it can work if you do have a tablet. So let me just switch over to camera 3 here, and now you guys should see my ATEM. And the first thing that I do is I pick a color that works with the background, and you do that up with the color selections. And then I go down to the downstream key, and I pick, for this particular situation where I want to draw with me in the picture, I use camera 2, which is another MacBook that's running Autodesk software that's called Sketchbook Pro. And that lets me draw. It shows up on the MacBook. The MacBook brings it in through the ATEM. And then if I want to draw on a different image altogether, I just have it hooked into the ATEM as a different camera and bring that source in that way and still use the same color. So I don't know if people have questions about this. You do have to set up your key with your clip and your gain, and you can do a mask, which I find helps eliminate some of the things that show up on the computer that has the Sketchbook Pro running.
Thanks for pointing that out, Mark. Tony?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the reason why I've embraced Video Pencil is because I have an ATEM, and Mark, I have not been able to figure out how to do it that way. So for me, Video Pencil is a lot easier. Just installing the app, and now I'm going to say that there was an error on my part, and so it originally did not get installed properly. But one of the unique things, I have a lot of good friends in after hours, and so because of that, I was able to get it to work correctly. But what that did do is that allowed me to experiment a lot with NDI and other solutions and ECAM and other things to get it to work. And we were successful in getting it to work. But when it works the way it's supposed to work, it's very easy to use. So that if you have an iPad and if you have a Mac, it is a seamless tool to use. And so I encourage anyone who has, and you can use it for free. It does have a watermark on it, but you can use it for free. And that's the main thing that I wanted to share. And then if you decided that you wanted to actually purchase it, it's $40. So.
Thanks, Tony. What's our next question, Erin?
Our next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What's the best aggregator type site for learning about pencil apps?
Google. When I looked for apps today, I went to the Mac App Store and just searched for screen annotation, because using a Luma key like I do, I just need something that can draw on any screen. And there was a handful of apps there, and they all cost less than $10. I downloaded a few, tried them out. And like I said, I used to like Presentify, but this Screen Brush app is working really well for me today. I just need to learn some of the keystrokes better. Next question.
And our final question comes to us from Paul Wallace. What topics are coming up on future Education Saturdays?
Thanks, Paul. I'm so glad you asked. That's one of our main topics next week in Education Hour is we'll be brainstorming ideas for the year 2023. We do have in Discord a channel where you can see our upcoming calendar, and there's a document there if anyone's interested in. Just ping me in Discord and you can see the ones we have planned so far, although that does change from time to time. I want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been an intriguing conversation, but unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to extend a personal thank you to everyone who's keeping the show going. Each and every morning, there's a large group of volunteers who make office hours happen, including Erin stepping in to answer questions today. For example, we have a whole group dedicated just to working outside of show hours, planning and coordinating each morning, and that takes a lot of work. Then we have a crew behind the scenes each day who make sure the show looks great. They manage our questions, cut the show, add graphics, and many more tasks. Next, we have our panelists who generously give their time to answer our questions. And finally, our producers who decide what happens on the show by asking questions and voting in Mukana. We couldn't do the show without you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on Education Saturday and in office hours. Typically, we use Saturday for training volunteers on new processes and new roles for office hours. So if you're interested, we encourage you to sign up through the web form that you get in your email every day. Today, Peter Belbin and Jeffrey Powers are learning new roles. So thank you, Peter and Jeffrey, for putting in some extra hours today. You can find next week's schedule in that morning email as well as links to our various special events and labs, like our new accessibility lab, which happens on Thursdays at 4:30 Pacific or 12:30 a.m. UTC. I guess that would be on a Friday now that I think about it. I want to encourage everyone here to stay through our credits and see the amount of effort that gets put into the show. You can see everyone who contributed today, including those who asked questions and those who have been working behind the scenes. We hope to see your name there sometime soon. Educational Hour will be back next Saturday, where we'll be brainstorming ideas for 2023. Until then, Happy New Year and roll the credits.
Whisper here too.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see everybody next year. Yeah, see you next year. So bye-bye and see you soon.
See you all.
Bye.